Hey guys, Brad here from Scooter Street. Got an easy one here today. I'm going to show you how to change the main jet on your 50cc two-stroke scooter. So I have an Aprilia SR50R behind me. These have the Piaggio Hyper 2 engine. So if you have any Piaggio, Vespa, almost any Aprilia, Gilera, Derby, a host of other brands, 50cc two-stroke scooter, you have pretty much the same engine as what's in this. Even if you have a different branded scooter, the process of changing a main jet is pretty much the same. So I'm going to show you how to take the carby off. I'm going to drop the bowl. I'm going to take the main jet out so we can change it. It's going to be particularly applicable to you if you're putting a 70cc cylinder kit or a performance exhaust on your scooter, because you must change the main jet if you're doing one of these sorts of modifications. It's imperative. If you don't, you will damage your engine. So I'm going to show you how to increase the size of the main jet on this one here. So we'll start by getting the carby off. So first things first, we're going to get the airbox off. Now the airbox fixings are a little bit different on a few different models. Just 2 bolts on this one, so I've popped them off. The next thing we're going to do is release the hose clamp which attaches the airbox to the carby. It's usually pretty easy to get to. There we go. Now if your scooter is a little bit old and the airbox hasn't been taken off in a while, it may be a bit stiff. Just be patient with it and don't be too rough, because you can crack the rubber boot if you're really rough. Okay, so we can see into the inside of the carby now. Now you can remove the carb completely, but if you're just changing the main jet, you can generally just pop the carb free from the intake manifold, and you have enough space with these lines and cables to just pop it up to the side, and we can access the screws for the bowl without removing the whole carb completely. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to swing around the other side. We're going to release the hose clamp that holds the carb to the intake manifold, and then we'll be able to pop the carb off to the side. So see this little hose clamp just in here. So a lot of this is just about being patient and not getting rough. There we go, coming free pretty easily. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now this is our bowl just here. So there's 2 screws for the bowl, 2 flat head screws. So I'm going to release these 2 screws, but as soon as I do this, the contents of the bowl, the fuel that's in there, is going to leak everywhere. So I'm going to go grab a rag. I'm going to pop a rag over the top of the engine casing here. There we go. That way, as the fuel spills out, it's not going to spill all over my engine casing. Now same with these as it is with the hose clamps. If you haven't released the bowl in a while, they can be a little bit stiff, so just be careful. There we go. All right, now see a bit of fuel popping out. Yep, it's going all over the rag, not making a huge big smelly mess. Now the factory carb in these Piaggio Hyper 2 engines is a Gilera PHVA 17.5. Really great little carby. Just a couple of things to mention while you're doing this. They do have an O-ring gasket that goes around a little recess, sits in a recess on top of the bowl. Just be careful that doesn't pop out of place. Again, if you haven't changed it recently, the gasket can sometimes get stuck to the aluminium body of the carby. So if that's the case, it's probably best, if it's sitting in place pretty solidly, just to leave it there, because when you put the bowl back on, it will reseat itself back in the recess on the bowl. The other thing to mention, this is our float. So this is what controls fuel getting into the bowl. As the fuel level increases, the bowl will lift and shut the fuel level off so it doesn't flood the engine. The bowl pivots off this little pin here. Now what can happen is, which is what's happened with this one, the pin can slip out of place when you pull the bowl off, and then it doesn't work properly anymore. It can flood the carb. So when you remove the bowl, be very careful that that pin doesn't slip out of place. As a really great example, it has just on this particular carby. I'll pop that back through, and then gently pop our pin back in there. And there we go, it just sits in there. Obviously it doesn't happen when the bowl's on, because the shape of the bowl sits around both sides of the pin, so it can't move anywhere while we're running. So this is our main jet right here. So if you're doing a cylinder kit or an exhaust, this is what you're going to be tuning. This one down here, the idle, or sometimes called the pilot jet as well. Unless you're doing a pod filter or something similar, you don't need to change this, just leave that one alone. But the main jet, that's the one we want to change. So grab our flat blade screwdriver again, Gently undo it, and it should just pop out of place. So you see, this is the jet that we've just pulled out of this bike. It has an exhaust and a 70 kit, so it's got a lot bigger than the stock jet. It's got a 95 in it. This is where these little jet kits that we sell come in really handy. It has a whole assortment range of jets, and you can just go from the size that you're running. Say we needed to go up to a 98, which would be the next size up. We can just go up to that 98 size and neatly pop this one away so it doesn't get lost. So we're not going to change the jet in this one because this is the right jet for this scooter. So we're going to go ahead and pop this one back in. So once again, this pin can very easily fall out. So I've got my finger under there so it can't slip out. Going to pop our 6mm Gilera jet back in there. I'm going to tighten it. Now don't over tighten it. You just want it to be firm so it doesn't accidentally loosen itself. Alright, so I'll pop our bowl back on, being careful that the gasket is still seated in its little recess. Now there's also this little tube here, which is part of the choke gallery. That needs to go back into this slot, so we'll use that to locate it. And there we go. It sits back in place. Now, just the same as everything else, I'll keep repeating it. These screws on the bowl, you don't want to over tighten them. They just need to be firm, let that O-ring do its job. If you over tighten them, you can warp the shape of the plastic, and it ends up having a counterintuitive effect of causing a leak because it warps the shape of the plastic, and you can see a leak across the sides of the bowl because the screws have been over tightened and have warped the plastic. Alright, that's back on there. We're going to go ahead and pop it back into the intake manifold. Now carefully pop any cables back out of the way. The other thing to be mindful of is this little hose clamp here. Sometimes when they're loose they can flip around the other way. You're not putting the carby on and then you can't get to the hose clamp. So just make sure that that one, as well as the one on the airbox side, are in an accessible location so that once you pop the carb back on, you can actually get the hose clamp done back up. Just a little bit of negotiation around some of these parts. Now these have, I showed you before, a little recessed ring on the carb, so you'll get the mouth of the carb in and then you should feel it pop back into place quite definitively, and that's how you know that it is back in place properly. Same as always, just firm, doesn't need to go all the way up, just needs to not leak. That's feeling pretty good there. So I'll go ahead and pop the airbox back on now. So hose clamp point, tighten it up, so at the top there, go ahead and pop that back on. A little bit of careful negotiation. That's looking pretty good. A good thing to make sure of is that the tube has gone all the way over the mouth of the carb and that there's no places that air can leak. Go ahead and do the same with this hose clamp, just firm but not tight, just to stop any leaks. That's all we're trying to do. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the bolts that affix the airbox to the engine casing back in place, but we're all done. Thanks for watching, guys. Look, hopefully that was useful to you. Even if you have a different model of scooter, most 50cc two-strokes use a pretty similar carb setup, and the process of getting to your main jet's usually pretty much the same. So if you have any questions, as always, please leave us a comment. And if you're looking for any of the parts that we've shown in this video, such as jet kits for your scooter, jump on to Scooter Street. Thanks very much.